The air outside the master bedroom window of the Miller family's home felt cold and clammy, typical of late October in a quiet suburb. Clara glanced at the time on her phone, 10:15 p.m. It was late, and all she could hear was the gentle friction of the oak tree branches outside rubbing against the window frame, along with the faint hum of the air conditioning unit. Clara, 17, was the Millers' favorite babysitter. They lived in a large, well-maintained two-story colonial house. Tonight, her duty felt a little heavier. This was her last shift because she was moving to the city soon for college. Mr. and Mrs. Miller had gone to a charity event. They left 3 children, Ethan, 8, who was fast asleep in his upstairs room, Lily, 6, who was usually restless, and the youngest, Timmy, 4, who was known to sleepwalk. Clara turned on the television in the living room and tried to focus on the movie she was playing. However, the silence of the large house felt oppressive. Usually she would call her best friend, but she knew the Miller parents didn't like too many distractions. At 11 p.m., Clara went upstairs for her routine check. She first checked Ethan's room. Ethan slept on his stomach, snoring softly. Normal. Then Lily's room. The little girl was curled up under a princess-themed blanket, her worn-out rabbit doll, Mr. Hoppy, having slipped from her grasp. Clara picked up Mr. Hoppy and placed him back in Lily's arms. As she turned around, her eyes caught something. In the doorway stood Timmy. He stood straight, looking directly at Clara. His eyes were half closed, his face expressionless. "Timmy? Sweetie, are you sleepwalking?" Clara whispered softly. Timmy didn't move. He only pointed to the dark corner of the room, where a pile of toys lay. "What's over there?" Clara asked. Timmy uttered a single word, his voice low and hoarse, almost like a whisper of wind. "Him." Clara's heart sank. She turned to look, but the corner of the room was completely empty, only toys and shadows cast by the star-shaped nightlight. When she turned back, Timmy was gone. Clara rushed out. She saw Timmy's small back disappearing around the corner towards the bathroom. "Timmy, you have to go back to bed now. It's late," she said, knocking on the door. No answer. "I'm going to open it, okay?" "You shouldn't lock yourself in the bathroom." Clara turned the doorknob. The door was locked from the inside. "Timmy, open the door, now!" Her voice started to rise. The pause of silence was suffocating. Suddenly she heard a sound. Not a child's whimper, but a harsh metallic scraping from behind the door. Like someone was dragging a heavy, sharp object across the ceramic tile floor. A cold dread began to creep up Clara's spine. She stepped back and stared at the plain white door. Then a whisper came from under the door gap, a voice that was deep, shaky, and absolutely not a child's voice. "I know this is your last shift, Clara." Cold sweat bathed Clara's temples. The sentence spoken was not merely a whisper, but a cold threat that pierced her. The voice, deep and old, clearly did not belong to 4-year-old Timmy. Clara jumped away from the bathroom door. Her knees were trembling. She tried to reason. "Maybe a radio is on?" "No, Mr. Miller never leaves a radio upstairs. Is one of the neighbor's kids hiding in here as a prank?" Suddenly, she realized something even more disturbing. If Timmy was inside, how could he lock the door from the inside? The doorknobs at the Miller house did not have internal latches. The door could only be locked using a small key from the outside. Then the metallic scraping sound came again, louder. This time it was followed by a heavy creaking, like old wooden furniture being dragged. Clara took out her phone. She wanted to call Mr. and Mrs. Miller, but she felt panicked. If she called them, And this was just a misunderstanding. They would surely be angry. But if this was something else, she couldn't delay. She stepped forward again, approaching the door. "Who's there?" she shouted, trying to make her voice sound firm, even though her throat was constricted. Silence. No scraping, no whispering, only the pounding of her own heart in her ears. Clara pressed her ear against the wooden door. She heard breathing, heavy, irregular, and shaky breathing. It was too close. It was right behind the thin wood. Suddenly the doorknob spun once, twice, 3 times quickly and noisily, as if someone from inside was trying to open it. Clara screamed and backed away, stumbling backward. She hit a side table in the hallway. A small vase on it fell and shattered into pieces. The sound of the breaking vase seemed to be a trigger. The bathroom door shook violently, as if something large and strong was slamming into it from the inside. "Let him go!" Clara screamed, tears starting to well up. The banging stopped. Silence returned, even thicker than before. Clara looked at the broken vase on the floor, then at the bathroom door, which now looked slightly askew on its hinges. Then she heard something that made her freeze completely. The sound came from Timmy's room, which was down the hall behind her. It was a humming, a soft old lullaby, the song Mrs. Miller always sang. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Clara knew for certain Timmy's room was behind her. If Timmy was in the bathroom, who was humming in his room? And the voice sounded incredibly close. Clara slowly turned around, staring into the dark hallway. In the doorway of Timmy's room stood a shadow figure. Not Timmy. It was much taller. Its silhouette was thin and unnatural under the faint moonlight from the window. And the humming stopped. The figure raised its long, thin hand, then pointed at her. And Clara realized the hand was holding a small key. The key used to lock the bathroom door from the outside. The figure stooped slightly, and the deep, hoarse voice spoke again. Not from the bathroom, but from Timmy's doorway. "You're late, Clara. The children are with me now." Clara's fear turned into pure adrenaline. She no longer cared about the broken plate or punishment from the Miller family. There was something malicious in this house, and it had taken the children. The tall, thin figure in Timmy's doorway began to step out of the shadows. Its face was not clearly visible, but she could see the rough lines on its clothing, some kind of worn-out robe or gown, and most horrifyingly, its gaze. Its eyes felt like 2 black holes sucking all the light out of the hallway. The figure raised its hand again, the small silver key gleaming in the dim light. "You can be the last one, Clara," the voice hissed, now sounding like the dry whisper of old leaves. Clara didn't think. Her instinct took over. She knew she couldn't fight. There was only one way out. Run. She turned and dashed down the stairs as fast as she could, her feet stumbling, skipping the last few steps. Thud. She landed on the living room floor. Suddenly, she heard a loud rumbling sound from upstairs, like doors being slammed simultaneously from Ethan's and Lily's rooms. The figure was chasing her. Clara ran towards the front door, the cold doorknob in her hand. She turned the key, pulled the latch, and pushed the door. The door was stuck fast. She pulled it again, panicked, but it was as if an invisible internal lock had sealed it from the outside. "No! Please!" she cried, pounding on the wooden door. She turned around. The figure was now at the top of the stairs, moving down with slow, agonizing steps, as if each step defied gravity. Clara backed away, her eyes searching for a weapon or a hiding place. Her gaze fell upon the door to the small powder room under the stairs. That small wooden door was her last hope. She slipped inside and slammed the door shut. She tried to lock the knob, but, like the bathroom door, it had no internal lock. Clara leaned against the door, holding her breath. She could hear the heavy footsteps stop right outside, a deadly silence. Then the sound of long claws began to scratch the wooden door right next to her ear. Screech. Screech. "You can't hide in here, sweet girl," the voice whispered, sounding incredibly close. Clara closed her eyes. She felt pressure on the door. The figure must be leaning against it. She glanced into the narrow powder room. The room was almost empty, with only a small sink and a rectangular mirror on the wall. In the mirror, Clara saw herself. Her face was pale, terrified. But she also saw something else in the mirror, something that shouldn't have been there. Right behind her stood Lily, the 6-year-old girl. Lily stood inside the powder room, right behind Clara, wearing her princess pajamas, with the rabbit doll, Mr. Hoppy, which she had hugged earlier. Clara should have screamed, but her voice was gone. She slowly turned her head. No Lily. The room was empty behind her. She looked back at the mirror, and her heart stopped beating. In the mirror, Lily was staring at her with vacant eyes, and slowly Lily's face began to twist into a wide, terrifying grin. And from Lily's mouth in the mirror, a whisper emerged, not a child's voice, but a completely different voice, a grown woman's voice, full of hatred, echoing in the small room. "My mother was supposed to be your babysitter, not you." Then a pale white hand emerged from within the mirror and gripped Clara's shoulder from behind. The grip on Clara's shoulder felt cold as ice and as strong as steel. It wasn't a child's grip. It was a cold, painful force coming from the impossible place, her reflection in the mirror. Clara screamed. She closed her eyes and pushed forward with all her might, slamming into the door behind her, hoping her physical strength could repel the spectral touch. As she pushed, a wet, hoarse cackle emanated from the mirror. Clara opened her eyes. Lily's reflection in the mirror had been replaced by the face of an old woman with tangled hair and sunken eyes, her face filled with burning rage. The woman's face sneered, showing yellow, sharp teeth. "You took my shift. Now you belong to me," the ghost whispered. Suddenly, the pressure on Clara's shoulder vanished. The grip released. Clara collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. She stared at the mirror. The woman's face was gone. All that remained was her own terrified reflection, and in the background of the mirror, she saw the reflection of the living room hallway. And in the reflection of the hallway, she saw the tall, thin figure standing straight, blocking the powder room exit. The figure stood still, but she could feel its eyes staring at her. Clara realized the powder room was a trap. She was caught between the entity in the mirror and the entity outside. She had to move. With her remaining strength, Clara crawled on the floor, moving away from the mirror. She reached the small sink. Her eyes focused on an object next to the faucet. It was Timmy's blue toothbrush, placed in its usual spot. Timmy didn't take it to the bathroom, she thought. He never went in there. That meant the creature in the hallway had trapped her. Clara stood up, facing the door directly. She took a deep breath. "I'm getting out of here," she whispered to herself. She turned, bracing herself against the sink, and shattered the mirror with her elbow with all her strength. The glass broke with a loud bang, filling the powder room with sharp shards and crystalline fragments. A heart-wrenching shriek of pain was heard simultaneously with the mirror breaking. The old woman's voice, but 10 times louder, tearing at her eardrums. The door behind her flew open. The tall, thin figure stepped back, floating away from the doorway, as if struck by an invisible shockwave. This was Clara's chance. She didn't look back. She leaped out of the chaotic powder room, ran across the living room, and once again lunged at the front door. This time the key turned freely. She pulled it open with all her might and ran out into the cold, dark night, wearing only a t-shirt and jeans. She kept running down the quiet suburban street until she reached the nearest neighbor's house. She pounded on the door, sobbing hysterically. The police and social services arrived. The Miller house was searched. The bathroom door upstairs was locked, and after being forced open, the bathroom was empty. No Timmy, no signs of a struggle, only the broken vase in the hallway. Ethan's and Lily's rooms were also empty. No signs of forced entry. The Miller children had vanished without a trace. Clara told them everything, from Timmy's sleepwalking, the whisper behind the door, to the mirror in the powder room. Of course, no one fully believed her. They concluded that Clara might have been hallucinating from stress and panic. The only strange evidence, the mirror in the powder room was completely shattered, as if punched. And on the floor of Timmy's room, the police found a small, rusted key. The key used to lock the bathroom door from the outside. The Miller family never returned to the house. Clara was cleared of any wrongdoing, but her spirit was broken. She never went to college. She never babysat again. Months later, a local historian mentioned an old, rarely told story. Years ago, in the colonial house where the Millers lived, a fiercely jealous nanny who wanted to take over Mrs. Miller's position attempted to kidnap the children. She was found having taken her own life in one of the upstairs bedrooms after her attempt failed. The story ended with the whisper that her spirit was still looking for new children to care for, always on the last shift of any visiting babysitter. Clara often woke up at night, remembering the last whisper she heard, not from a ghost, but from the reflection of the child herself. "My mother was supposed to be your babysitter, not you." She wondered, was the ghost nanny really trying to trap her? Or was the ghost just trying to claim the children who had been hidden by another entity in the house? And where did Timmy, Lily, and Ethan actually go? The questions were never answered. Clara lived her life, always carrying a chill on her shoulder, a reminder of her last shift, and the voices she heard from the peaceful darkness of the suburbs.